right, well, Jim, if you need it, let me know. I'll give you the host.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
We're on.
Well, welcome to the Kern Fire Safe Council's February 2023 webinar. Kern Fire Safe Council brings experts to the Kern County community to answer your questions and get you ready for wildfires or any other disaster California brings our way. My name is David Stenstrom, and I'm here with Julia Neiman. And tonight's topic, we present home ignition fires, home ignition zones, with our speaker, Jim Niss of Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is a veteran-led humanitarian organization that serves global communities before, during, and after disaster and crises. Their website is teamrubiconusa.org. Check them out. Jim Niss worked with the Ventura County Public Works Agency from 1980 until 1995 in the mapping department, helping develop the GIS, which is the Geographical Information System. It's a map used by county departments all over for spatial awareness and development. I'm sure he'll cue us into that. In 1995, he joined the Ventura County Fire as a GIS specialist, responsible for the 911 center line for emergency response. He's worked on over 50 large-scale fires, landslides, floods, and by extension, Hurricane Katrina as the GIS specialist. I hope I get all that stuff right. In 2008, saw him retire from Ventura Fire and create Veterans Emergency Technical Services, Inc., which provides mapping and infrared analysis during wildfire operations throughout California. In 2016, Jim started working with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, designing and developing the ranch plans and mapping projects. In 2020, he joined the VRFSC board as well as joining Team Rubicon. Jim is an inspector and trainer utilizing the home ignition zone, which is the HIZ techniques, for hardening homes against wildfires. He's currently the Team Rubicon Metro Administrator for the Central Coast of Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo. Jim will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take your questions. And please write your questions in the chat box, please. And if we run out of time before we get to your question, we'll answer it on the website, which is kernfiresafe.org. And that's where you can ask questions and check out our resources and partners. We will put both websites in the chat box for you. Julia, are you ready?
We are.
Okay, well, during a wildfire, thousands of embers can rain down on your home and property like hail during a storm. That's the home ignition zone. Let's let Jim Niss tell you more about that. Take it away, Jim.
All right, thank you very much. So the presentation tonight is just a something to get your beak wet, if you will, with the old term there, of what the home ignition zone is. It's actually started about 20 years ago with a scientist named Jack Cohen. Worked for the Forest Service. And he, during his research post-fire, he was really concerned or puzzled by why some homes withstood a fire and the home next door did not. And it's not magic, it's fire prevention. I'm sure all you folks understand keeping your properties clean as possible, getting a workable, defensible space, things like that. What I'm going to do tonight is just kind of give you a little teaser on this, and that hope that you'll come to the class that's going to be April the 1st, and we're going to spend a whole day really diving into what the home ignition zone is, how it works, and as successful as it can be. So with that, I'm going to try to share my screen. There we go. All right, can you see, y'all see that red page?
We do.
Okay, cool. So initially I had quite a few, or not a few, a couple videos that I was going to intersperse in here, but the Zoom just doesn't work very well with playing videos, so I'm going to skip over that. And if you do keep your chat window open, you'll see at the end of the presentation, there'll be a link to a Dropbox where I have stashed a couple of these videos. You can bring them down to your local machine and just play them there so that you get the truly what they look like. Initially, I want to give you a brief overview of Team Rubicon. It's a pretty unique bunch of folks. It started in 2010, the earthquake at Haiti. We had two guys, two Marines that decided they wanted to go over help. They ran into four other folks at the airport flying over, and they went to Haiti. They spent a couple weeks there. They were doing mainly medical support. And they just became really encouraged about what they saw, what they were able to do. So they started this organization, Team Rubicon. And at the beginning, it was a veteran-only organization. But as we grew, it became aware that there were so many civilians that wanted to get into this world as well. So here we are almost 13 years later, and we have over 150, 160,000 volunteers across the country. Our primary focus is getting communities back up on their feet when they're most likely through hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. So our main operation is in the Southeast, where all that happens. In fact, we have crews heading to Alabama and Mississippi from the tornadoes that just happened. We have folks that are in Ukraine, and we also have folks that are in Turkey right now. So we do just a lot of different things. And it's a phenomenal group, having that military mindset. It is kind of give us a job and get out of the way, and we're going to go do our thing. And it's worked rather well. So our brand, we're not like a typical nonprofit. When COVID hit and nonprofits step back, we move forward. We figured out a way to keep our members engaged, to keep doing stuff. We were highly involved in the testing and then what I want to say, are the shots, going through that whole process. We ran a couple million people through that. So we're broken up into three branches. The West branch covers pretty much the west of the United States, then you got the northern and the southern branch. So we operate as one function, and all that blue area is on the west side. That's what we were dealing with. So if we get into fire mitigation, about 2.5 years ago, Team Rubicon decided that the bulk of our efforts are in the south and the east. We need to do some things on the west to keep our membership engaged, so that they're not losing their skill set and not getting disappointed that they're not being going out into the field. So we started getting into fuel modification. And right now we are, I ran 2 operations in Ventura last year. Kern County is going to have one this year for you guys. Sacramento, just before the January flooding event, we had started a fuel modification up in Sacramento, which is still ongoing. So we went from that fuel modification to flood response. And now that is over, now we're going back into fuel modification. So just to give you an idea of what our mitigation capabilities are, we do fuel modification plans, we do the defensible space, HIZ training, and also the functionality of that. Part of that HIZ is home hardening, creek and culvert repair, and sandbagging when it's necessary. So you all can read this. It's essentially, this program is designed to get the homeowner to let their properties get as squared away as they can. You know, there's no guarantee that anything that we do is going to stop your home from catching on fire, but all we can do is the best we can to essentially, it's ember intrusion. It's keeping those embers outside of the home, and even outside, we don't want them piling up where they can do some damage. And that's the whole process of this training. We came across this graphic last year, and it really tells a story of the largest 20 wildfires we've had since ever, actually. So if we look at the beginning there, you can see between 32 and 99, we had some big fires, but not too many. In 2000 through 2009, a lot of the Zaka fire was there, which impacted the county quite a bit. And then as the years have gone by, with whatever's happening with our climate, we're getting more and more large fires. When the Thomas Fire hit in 2017, that was the largest fire ever in California. Within a couple months, it had been bypassed by the Mendocino complex. And you can see it's just gone on. The August and the North Complex, the Creek Fire, the Dixie, the fires are just getting gigantic. And part of that is our own fault. And the fault is the Forest Service about 100 years ago decided that all fire was bad. And so they've rushed in and they just put fire out, put fire out, put fire out. Well, what that has done is, in a normal, healthy forest, the leaves fall down, the needles, and they create a duff layer that is maybe a couple inches thick, maybe even 6 inches thick or so. So when the fire comes through and it's a ground fire, it just runs through, burns up those 6-8 inches of material. It doesn't go up the tree very much. You'll see the lower branches on trees are burned off because that low fire went through really fast, didn't have a lot of momentum behind it. But what's happened is, with this no fire concept, that duff layer is now 2 feet thick or 3 feet thick. So now when the fire runs through it, it's putting out a 15-foot flame length that now gets into the tree, and that tree is going to be ignited. And we run into what they call a crown fire, which is just going to the top of the trees go from the top to the top to the top. And it just pushes forward, and it's really difficult to try to manage. So here's a little map I put together of your area. And these are all the fires that go back to 1900. And we can kind of see that I-5 corridor is where most of these things have taken place. And a dollar to donuts, I would say quite a bit of those are because of automobiles. When the catalytic converter came into play, people don't realize how much heat that thing gathers. And they would pull off the road and get into the grasses, and the catalytic converter fires up those grasses, and then you're off to the races. So you can see the fires that are happening here along I-5. They're big, they're not gigantic, but as they start moving over to you all, there's a big space there, there really is not a lot of activity. And I don't know exactly why that's happening in there. It may be the terrain, it may be the vegetation that's keeping those fires down, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And if something does roll into that area, we want to make your community as safe as possible from a disastrous wildfire. Anybody have any questions so far? We're all good?
Not yet, but excuse me just a minute. I would like to remind our visitors to please mute yourself and turn off your video, because we can see every move you make. Not,
Okay.
nope, not happening. Okay.
Okay,
Team,
so that,
turn off your video and your sound, please. I tried.
Who are you talking to?
how about you, Dean? If you could turn off your video or your audio.
Your audio and your video, please.
What it does is it saves bandwidth so that we won't have any burps up in here.
My audio's off.
Okay. All right, we're good.
Who
So
else talking to?
you're cool.
Okay.
Here we go.
I'm muted.
So a couple slides here just to kind of get us down to where we're at. So the home ignitions are diminished. Activities such as removing vegetation, using ignition resistant construction, fire protection resources can be applied to containing the fires rather than just dealing with the structure. In large events, there are just never enough fire engines, firefighters to go around. And we don't have enough resources to park an engine in everybody's property to make that happen. So we want to get our stuff squared away so that those resources can be used elsewhere. That's pretty much just what I said. If we keep our places squared away, homes aren't burning up, they can attack that fire and keep it further away as possible. So if they don't ignite, they don't burn, obviously. So whether a structure is ignited depends primarily on the exterior construction materials. Obviously, the structure's design, its geographic location on the property. Is there things that we can't change, obviously, now for new construction? You know, are you going to be at the front of that slope? Are you going to be at the back of that slope? Both of those things have pluses and minuses as far as fire behavior comes into play. Defensible space is probably the biggest thing. Typically, up until this home ignition zone process came into play, it was essentially defensible space, and the county would come out and say you need to clean 100 feet from your property, or even more in some locations. But that really wasn't addressing the issue of the structure of the home ignition zone. It was just kind of trying to clear material as much as possible. So we're adapting to this wildfire. Wildfire is going to continue to be a threat across the U.S. There are large fires in Texas right now. You know, the fire season starts January, February in Florida, and I work with helicopters during wildfires, and their process is they have their equipment in Florida and they run those fires and they come into Texas. Then they start running through New Mexico, Arizona, work their way up to Wyoming, Montana, and then the fire season comes down the West Coast and ends in California. Kinda ends in October. So it's this whole process across the country. So with this proper education planning, we can just do our best shot at keeping our homes safe. And there's what we're going to go through is just a top level view of the how we prepare for that. So initially, what is the home ignition zone? And this is the process that Dr. Jack Cohen came up with of identifying these various zones around your property and what we should do within them. So you have a zone 1, and some of the new ideas is there's actually zone 0 that they say is the structure itself. But the zone 1 actually takes a structure and it goes out to that 30-foot level. So we've got right around the home is zone 1. Then zone 2 is the next band. And that essentially, let me back up just a bit. So in zone 1, we want to make sure that our structure is sound. It's got a good roof on it. It doesn't have material up against the house. Doesn't have, if possible, have double pane windows. Certainly have all the areas that are open to ember intrusion, get that filled in with caulking, all that type of stuff. Then you move on into zone 2, and you're kind of relaxing the extreme things that you want to do around your home. You're gonna separate your trees a little bit further. Your bushes, if they're there, are going to be spread apart. And in zone 3, it's even further. The trees can be a little closer together. The idea here is if you had a wall of flame that was 100 feet from your home, it doesn't have enough radiant heat to catch your home on fire. It needs direct ember intrusion or flame contact to make that happen. So as a human, we at 100 feet away, we would get burned up, our skin would, but the siding on your home is not going to be impacted by flames that are 100 feet away. So we want to keep that distance.
Jim, this is Joan. If I could interrupt for just a second. As the host, can you tell if you have anybody in the waiting room wanting to come in late?
I'm looking for.
Julia, maybe you can walk
Yeah,
him through that.
I don't have that capability.
I don't see it because I'm sharing my screen.
Hmm.
Let me see.
And I don't see
Indications.
participants. I don't
Yeah, I don't
see
see that at
anybody in
all.
the waiting room. So,
Okay, thank you for checking.
Okay, sure. All right, I misspoke just a second ago. The zone 1 is 0 to 5 feet. And that zone, you'll see that there's just some easy things that we can do to harden up that home or the home itself. Come on. Zone 2 is at 5 to 30 feet, and zone 3 is 3,200. And if we need to go beyond that because of what's happening on a particular lot, go more than 100 feet. And especially in residential areas, these zones can overlap. So your 100-foot zone could overlap your neighbor's 100 foot. And the key, I've been doing this for about 4 years of doing inspections and so on. The biggest issue that we've come up against is not taking a holistic view, a neighborhood view of this process. Because if you get your home squared away and your neighbor doesn't, it's just like you didn't do anything. you know, it's taking that whole neighborhood concept for this whole process. So let's look at that 0 to 5. So we want to make sure the roof is clean and in good repair. There's not pine needles that are piled up in the crevices behind the chimney, behind dormers, all that kind of stuff. Cleaning the gutters, that is a big thing. You've probably seen, I know I get them every day, the commercials of about, what's the name of the company? It's a cover that goes over the gutters, which works really, really well. And installing 1/8 inch screens. So during the class, you're going to see, actually, just to back up a second, when I'm going to post these videos that you guys can get to today. Before the class, I'm going to be posting other videos there. And there are some really good ones from this company that's down south that has created this Ember Creator. So they built a house in a warehouse, and then they created this machine that has blowers, and it picks up embers and it shoots it at the house. And you can see how those things attack the different materials, from vinyl siding, wood siding, what type of roofing material. And typically in home construction, the vents that are in your attic or even your vents on the ground are 1/4 inch. And embers can shoot through that 1/4 inch pretty good. The 1/8 inch is what they're suggesting. The embers can still get through, but they're kind of beat up. If they make it through, there's not a lot of volume left on the ember. And we're just trying to keep those things out of the attic as much as possible. And then it's, repairing and replace those window screens. Quite often the window screens are the fiber, and those will ignite, more or less melt. Moving those to the metal screens is always a good thing. And as I said before, replacing those windows, if you have single pane, if you can replace them to double pane, it gives you an extra layer of protection. If it gets so hot up against the structure that it cracks the window, on a double pane, at least you have another surface for it to damage before heat is directly inside the house. And that's moving flammable material away from the house. That is primarily what they're talking about is if you have your wood pile up against your home, get that thing pushed 30 feet away. If you have deck furniture, if you get into a red flag situation, or if you're in evacuation, take that material off of your deck, get it out onto your lawn, whatever, away from the home. So now we go into the second one, the intermediate zone. And this is essentially breaking up your property. So it's just not solid trees or bushes. You're going to break it up. How do we do that? We make little fuel breaks. You can do that with driveways, walkways, patios. Keep in mind, any of these things that we're talking about is not turning your property into moonscape. It's being scientific and smart about how you put the vegetation around your home. Obviously, if you've got stuff right up against your house, you need to get it off. You need to pull that back, or change the vegetation so it's not as flammable. And that'll be part of the links that I make available to you as well, is recommended plants that can be used on the property. keep your lawn mowed, remove those ladder fuels. So the ladder fuels, and again, this we'll dive into this pretty deep. But like right now, we've got a lot of rain that's happened this year, and that's going to be putting out a pretty strong grass crop, and your mustard is going to get pretty high, and those are those ladder fuels. So when they dry out, you can imagine the grasses are your lowest ladder fuel. It then runs into some type of lower vegetation, could be scrub, gets into that. And then from there, it moves up into the trees. So you want to break that ladder. However you can break it, either it's on the lower grasses or even up into your scrub. If you break those things apart, you're doing yourself a wonderful job. And in this space, we want to have the tree canopies about 18 feet apart. And the process for that is if the tree does catch on fire, you're going to have a 18-foot span between those trees. So it's not going to be so easy to just run from one to the next. You're trying to break stuff up. So if a fire does happen in there, it doesn't have a lot of material to carry that fire on. And that's clustering the trees and shrubs in small groups. That's kind of what that's all about. So now we get on the outside, this outside green band that we have here. Essentially there, it's primarily removing the litter underneath all of your existing trees out there. Remove the dead plants. You got oak trees, you don't want to be cutting down those oak trees. Everybody loves those things, but they have a lot of litter. You can get to the bottom of the tree and start trimming the limbs that you can so that they're not as close to the ground and they're not going to catch everything. So removing those dead plants and trees, removing the vegetation around storage sheds. So when I do an inspection, any outbuilding I consider a separate structure. So if I'm doing an evaluation of the structure, we essentially break the home up into 4 sides, A, B, C, and D. And you take each side and you do an evaluation. So if I have an outbuilding, I want to do that same thing. Because the 2 areas from the outbuilding to the main structure, they may overlap those home ignition zones. And here the canopies can be brought closer together. Because again, if it's 100 feet away and they've caught on fire, that's a bummer, but it's not going to be that detrimental to your structure because it's so far away. So if we had a fire there, then we bring it into the 5 to 30, and now the trees are further apart. And the idea is they won't carry as well as the trees if they were close together. I got to turn off my sound just for a second. For some reason, I still have a landline and I get bogus calls. So just take a second. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah. So that is essentially just a primer of what we will go through on April the 1st. The course is typically a 2-day class, and we're going to break it down to the primary things that we need to get through into a 1-day course. So the morning part of the class is going to be classroom, and we're going to go through fuel fire behavior, the HIZ zones in the depth of that. And that is it's gonna be a solid morning. We're gonna have a lot of information there. Then we'll take a breath, a short lunch, and then we're going to go out and inspect the homes that have been identified up in your area. So we'll do a group inspection, probably of the building that we're going to have the classroom in. We'll walk around, we'll do a inspection of that. And then we're going to set up, I'm on the board for the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. And one of our inspectors that are doing these inspections as in a daily part of their job, he's going to come up with me and he's going to be a co-presenter. Young guy, really sharp. What it'll do is it will break the class down into about 10 or so of 2 groups of 10. We'll then go hit those individual homes, make those inspections, and then come back and do a debrief. And at that time, we can go through the inspection, have any questions, details, and just go on from there. And the idea here is that the folks that are going to be in the class, we are certainly hoping that they will inspect their own home, but we want them to reach out to their neighbors that may not have been in the class and say, you know, let's sell the process here and see if they're interested in doing that as well, having their homes inspected. I'm going to stop to share. There we go. Okay, so that was kind of quick. There was a lot of info in there. Again, we're going to be diving pretty deep into this next month. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, well, just Jim, I want to just thank you. Golly, there's so much information to know. And but you brought it in, it sure wets my whistle for the rest of it. The Kern Fire Safe Council, like he said, is offering this class on home ignition zones on April 1st, correct?
Yes.
And if you're interested, place your name and number in the chat box and we'll get back with you. Who's got a question?
So we have a question. Joan, I have your question. I'll get through it in a minute. But Jim, I wanted to ask you to address something. So our area, our particular mountain, Fraser Mountain, is what's called a WUI area. And for anybody that doesn't know, that's, you know, wildlife urban interface. And we have some really, really, really tall pine trees. And some of them are dead or dying from the drought and need to come down. But the cost to do that is so prohibitive that these homeowners can't afford to do it. And do you have any recommendations of anything we could do to make these safer? And I'm looking around today after these storms, there are broken limbs and trees down everywhere, just on my block.
Right. So that's a tough question. Let me think here just a second. So CAL FIRE is driving the bus right now of the HIZ process. And over the last couple of years, they have shoved quite a bit of money out to the fire safe councils. That's how the Ventura group, we got these employees go out and do the inspections. But what they haven't provided is a mechanism to get the work done. So they said, okay, we're going to give you money to go out and do an inspection and tell the homeowner that unfortunately that their home is not as clean as it should be, but we're not going to give you any money to make that happen. In the last 6 months, that's changed. We knew this was kind of coming, but now we're seeing it. So there are and it's just the beginning of it. So there's going to be more and more money to actually do mitigation. And so I would suggest with the fire safe councils to stay on top of CAL FIRE and get those grants where they can come in and do the mitigation. And that mitigation could be helping you replace your windows, helping you do your screens. If we have disabled senior folks, getting them some help because they can't do it themselves. It may be, I'm not going to say being able to replace a roof because that's too expensive, I think, even for CAL FIRE, but what I do envision is you'd be able to hire a crew to come in and take down some of those trees. And those are expensive. I think to drop a tree is like maybe $4,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not
Some of the
cheap.
quotes are as high as 8,000.
Yeah,
Because these are tall pine trees, really tall.
right. So on another note here, so I am the Central Coast Administrator for Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon, I kind of went through that with you. So we're doing fire mitigation projects. And I think in May, there's going to be a project in your area. So that we're going to be able, essentially we come in and we do an evaluation of a particular community. And often we work with the fire chiefs or the fire safe councils or whatever they have that does that. They'll drive us around here. Here are our problem areas. What can you do for us? So then we'll come back and we'll huddle up and go, okay, those particular trees are too big for us to handle, but these, we can handle these over here. So we can handle a tree typically up to 18 inches at breast height. So from what I understand, we're going to be doing, I think, a 4-day project up in your area, and we're going to do fuel modifications. So some of that is simple yard work, cleaning up things, but they're also going to be felling some trees. And that's getting with Denise, who is the Team Rubicon admin for Kern County. She's the one that helped put all this together on my side. So if you've got some problem areas, that's the one to talk to is get a hold of Denise.
Okay. We'll start making notes because there's a lot of areas that need help. We have a lot of the homes here. Pine Mountain Club was created in like 1970s. So there's a lot of homes that were built way before the code changes.
Yeah.
So, and they haven't really been maintained or updated in a long time. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done here.
Right.
Yeah. So let's get to Joan's question now. And to open the chat here. And my chat box. Oh, here it is over here. Okay.
Oh, by the way, the link that I put in the chat is for the Dropbox where you can get those videos.
Okay, perfect. And then Joan's question was about the GIS, and let me see if I can find it again, because suddenly everybody's making notes in the chat. So I don't see the question. I don't see your question again, Joan, but correct me if I'm wrong. It was about, she wanted to know on the GIS map, do you have any data on the origins of the fire, the direction that it came from, and the direction they moved in? I guess she's wanting to know what the data points on the map are.
Yeah, no. So that is a fire history map that is produced by CAL FIRE. And it's basically CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, BLM, Indian Affairs. They if there's fires on their property, on their land they control, they put it in this data set. Trying to think. There on some of them there might be some information on certainly when they happened, because what I did is I coded that for every 10 years. I color coded that. I just kind of shoved them all together. I'd have to look, and if we wanted to, you know, you're free to share my contact information with her, and we could talk, and possibly I could bring up some data during the class.
That would be great. And yeah, she said what she's looking for is patterns.
Yeah. Isn't everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll anything that I have access to, I am free to share.
Certainly with wildfires and things like that, INSUEB would have possibly a history. There might be a history of direction, wind direction at the time. There will be a full-on report for each one of those fires, but you would just have to find a way to get to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's, I mean, there it's somewhere. Certainly any fire that happened after 1950s or so, they've got all that information, but it's squirreled away in some vault somewhere. After a while, what they do is they take all the they'll purge all the documents and they'll send them back to Washington, D.C. And they're in the archive, the National Archive. But that would be a whole different thing.
And Joan, I'd like to recommend that you go to our website and look for the webinar on fire ecology. Because the presenter, I don't remember her name, sorry, but she presented some things on the way fire moves. And she was down at the HOV park and talked about that from our area. And then we also, with the fire chief, discussed the French fire and the way the French fire moved. And that was a really fascinating discussion. So you might want to go check out that because they do cover some patterns in that discussion.
Okay.
So that's pretty much, I don't see any other questions. If anybody has any questions.
I do.
Oh,
My
David, go for it.
My neighbor is he's got a lot of trees, and they're within all of that, all the good and all the bad. And I have broached the subject to him. I don't know if there's any way of compelling someone other than my insurance company came in and said, you have to have the ladder fuel above your roof at 10 feet and things like that. And so for me to keep my insurance, I had to do that. But this guy, I don't know who his insurance company is, but they are not, they are like over his house and near my house. And I don't know if I have any recourse to encourage him, to beg him, to force him to pull the leaves out, you know, pull the trees down, not to pull the trees down, but to trim them up and to make them safe for the neighborhood. And that's, and certainly in Pine Mountain, there's a lot of absentee landlords that may be reluctant because it's just a cash cow for them and they don't want to invest in it. And are there any legal recourses for people?
You know, that's out of my ballywig.
Okay.
But it's a tough call. It's yeah, I mean, we've been on places before where we've done work and the people right next door, they're adamant that they don't want to do anything. And
Yeah.
there's, from what it's private property and you get into all that. So
Yeah.
it's having good relationships and sometimes it's hard.
Yeah. We had this discussion when we did a webinar on defensible space, and the fire department, the POI and the chief were telling us there's really not much you can do. You can ask your neighbors to limb up their branches and clean up a little, but there's nothing legally that can compel them. But you could you could report it to the fire department and they might come out and have a chat with the guy or leave a letter or something.
Okay.
But beyond that, there's not much that they said there's not much they can do. And partially with defensible space, you might tell your neighbor this, with defensible space, what they told us was if you're not clear, if your property's not clear, they're not even going to bother to try to save it because they have something they call ankle biters, which is the flames from the ground that come up and threaten the firemen as they're fighting the fire. And they're not going to put themselves in that position.
Well, that's great.
Julia, I have
Yeah.
a question. You
Yes.
brought up defensible space, but Jim is talking about home ignition zones, and to me, they sound like the same thing or very similar. Are we phasing out the term defensible space and replacing it with home ignition zones?
I don't think so, but they do overlap. So, and this is just me on my soapbox. When this HIZ concept came into play, it was about 20 years ago. And the fire world said, no, we're not really interested in that. You're not really one of us. We're going to do it this way because we've been doing it this way for a long time. And it really didn't come into play until the Thomas fire and then all those fires after and Paradise. And they realized that the home ignition zone really had some teeth to it. And so now the fire departments are embracing that home ignition zone, but it does overlap defensible space. And defensible space can be different in that it can be as broad as identifying some defensible area on your property that you can go to that is clear, that if you get overrun by fire, you don't want to be in that house. You want to be in that clearing that will give you some protection. And it's defensible space is often used with what do they call it? It's just brush clearance. You know, you've Kern County, do you have to do it by June? Do
Yes.
brush clearance?
Yeah.
That's the defensible space. But it's not telling you how your home should be fixed to get rid of the ember intrusion. It's more of they want 100 feet away from your structure of typically grasses and shrubs and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was a dramatic video I saw on CAL FIRE TV on YouTube, and it was one of the guys in command of CAL FIRE. I think he was the second or third highest. He did home hardening at his home, and there was a fire that came through, and everything around him burned, and his house was just fine. It
Yep.
was so dramatic to see that. It was stunning.
Heartrending.
Yeah.
Now what we have done we're using a ceiling, not a ceiling fan, an attic fan, to cause positive ventilation, so that if there is a fire, you turn that on and it's pulling air out of the crawl space under the house.
Mhm.
And shooting it up and being pulled up through the living space into the attic, which is blowing out of the vents at the end of the roof vents.
Right.
And that I'm assuming that's if it doesn't have a vacuum, it's going to blow the embers away. And so they won't be able to be pulled in because there's cooler air inside or whatever the air patterns are doing. Is that a specious argument?
I haven't seen those before, but just thinking about it, if I have a 10-mile-an-hour or a 15-mile-an-hour wind coming out from inside the house, and I have a 10 or 15-mile-an-hour wind hitting it, that probably, that's gonna not allow those embers to go through. But if I have a 60-mile-an-hour wind, that may not
Yeah,
do
you-
much.
Yeah,
Well,
you should have left an hour ago. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's probably some residual effect in there of even if it's the outside wind is overpowering it, I think it's still disrupting it. So even the wind coming out, just not making it as easy for those embers to go in, I think is a plus.
Right. Okay. All right.
You guys, one thing I saw in the notes here, someone had asked if there was a makeup class for the April 1st, and there is not. If this proves to be good, if this is something that really works within your community, maybe we'll do it again. It's just again, we're volunteers. We go where folks want us. And if we need to do this annually, we can knock it out.
Great. Well, Jim, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for tonight. This has been great. And
Can I just add one thing, David?
yes, dear.
I just want to let people know that the assessments go only to the homeowner, because I've had people ask if these assessments get turned into their insurance company
No.
or to the fire department. There's I've really had quite a few people ask me that, and they don't go anywhere. We don't know who anybody's insurance company is, and the assessment goes straight to the homeowner. It's nothing mandatory. They are
Right.
suggestions, but when we're living in a wildland urban interface, as we are, they're pretty strong suggestions to save your property. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's definitely.
Great. Yeah, all you could do is ask and invite him over for cookies or something. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have one more question and I don't see it. So Joan, do you want to unmute yourself to ask your question? Because I don't see it in the chat.
Get the mute off. I wanted to ask what your thoughts are about the fireproof attic vents. I tried to get a representative from Vulcan to provide us with a sample so we
Okay.
could demonstrate it at information booths in the community.
Right.
And the Vulcan rep said they're more focused on marketing their products to new home builds because of current codes and not really interested in investing money in marketing toward retrofit. So do you have access to other companies with product samples that we can demonstrate that? Or are you thinking that maybe that's not a great direction to encourage?
No, that's, first of all, I think that's BS because they market to existing homes a lot. So I'm not sure where that guy was coming from. So Vulcan vents are interesting. I'm gonna have to be really quick here. I've got another meeting at 6, but I'll go through this in the class, but very quickly. Vulcan, what they do is they put a material on the vent, and when it gets up to a certain temperature, it explodes, goes, whoosh, which closes the vent. I've seen it. I've seen their demonstrations. Cool, but you have to have a lot of heat up against that vent for it to pop off like that. I think it's kind of if you've got that much heat against your house, you got a problem. There are other vents, Brand Guard, that capture the embers as they go through the vent. I think that's smarter. That was they're developed by a San Diego firefighter. We'll get into the class though. We'll have a whole session where we kind of talk, well, not a whole session. We'll have a couple minutes. We'll be able to talk about this.
Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, Jim. You gotta
I
go.
gotta roll.
But I want to thank you for being with us. Don't forget to check out those 2 websites. It's Team Rubicon, USA.org, and the currentfiresafe.org. That's us. And ladies and gentlemen, please join us next month on the webinar when the topic is Ready, Set, Go, March 28th at 5 p.m. and register on the website. Until then, I'm David Stenstrom with Julia Neiman, and I wish you a very pleasant good evening.
Good night.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Very
You bet.
much.
Thank you, Jim.
You bet.
Thank you,
See
Jim.
See you next
No
month.
worries. Okay.